The decision was made in a cold, sterile chamber deep within the heart of the Galactic Council's headquarters. Representatives of 100 alien species sat in towering seats, their eyes fixed on the glowing holographic display in the center of the hall. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Humanity is to be exiled. There were no protests, no voices raised in their defense. The vote was unanimous. The Council had spoken. Humanity, once welcomed into the galactic community with cautious optimism, was now deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable to remain among the stars. The official reason was wrapped in diplomatic language: claims of instability, reckless ambition, and an unwillingness to submit to galactic norms. But the truth was far simpler. The other species were afraid. Fear had taken root in the hearts of the galactic elite the moment humanity had shown what it was capable of. Unlike the long-lived, slow-adapting races of the galaxy, humans evolved too quickly, learned too fast, and refused to accept limits. In a mere few centuries, they had advanced from primitive space travel to building warships that rivaled the most powerful fleets. They had transformed barren moons into thriving colonies, invented technologies that defied conventional physics, and expanded into regions of space that had remained untouched for millennia. Most disturbing of all, humans never stopped pushing forward. When other species reached the peak of their civilization, they stagnated, content to exist as they had for thousands of years. But humans always wanted more. And that terrified the Council. The exile was swift and merciless. Trade routes were cut off overnight, communication networks severed, and all diplomatic ties burned to ash. Human colonies outside their home system were forcibly abandoned, their inhabitants given only days to leave before their settlements were dismantled or claimed by other species. Earth's allies, few as they were, remained silent, unwilling to risk their own standing with the Council. When human diplomats tried to plead their case, they were ignored. When they tried to resist, their fleets were overwhelmed by the combined might of the Council's armada. And when Earth's leaders finally accepted their fate, they watched as the last human ship was escorted out of the core systems, exiled to the distant fringes of the galaxy where no one expected them to survive. The Council believed they had crushed humanity before it could become a true threat. They thought this was the end. But it was only the beginning. At first, it seemed as though the Council's plan had succeeded. Cut off from the vast network of galactic trade, humanity struggled. Resources dwindled, industries collapsed, and entire cities fell into darkness. Without access to the advanced technology they had relied on for decades, they were forced to rebuild from the ground up. The once bustling colonies on the outer worlds turned into graveyards, abandoned to the cold void of space. Famine, war, and desperation spread across their remaining worlds. The galaxy watched from a distance, expecting humanity to fade away into irrelevance. But instead of breaking, they adapted. Instead of falling, they rose. Faced with extinction, humanity did what it had always done best. It fought to survive. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to develop new technologies, reverse engineering what little they had managed to salvage from their former allies. The loss of trade forced them to become self-sufficient, pushing their ingenuity to its limits. Old rivalries and divisions on Earth dissolved as a singular purpose took hold of their civilization. They no longer sought acceptance. They no longer cared for the approval of the Council. They had been cast out, but now they would forge their own path, one that no alien power could control. Years passed, then decades. The galaxy slowly forgot about humanity, believing them to be a minor footnote in history. The Council turned its attention to other matters, never once considering the possibility that they had made a mistake. No spies were sent to monitor human space, no scouts to check on their progress. In their arrogance, they assumed that without the guiding hand of the galactic community, humans would never rise again. And so, they did not see the signs. They did not notice when deep space signals, once scattered and disorganized, became unified and encrypted. They did not see the shadows of colossal warships taking form in the shipyards of hidden worlds, They did not hear the whispers of a species that had not only survived, but had grown stronger than ever before. Then, without warning, the first human vessel emerged from the darkness. It was not the battered, outdated relic the Council expected. It was a warship, sleek, powerful, and carrying weapons unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It did not announce its presence. It did not seek permission to return. It simply appeared, a ghost from the past, and with it came a message that sent a chill through the hearts of the Council. Humanity has returned. The silence of exile was heavier than war. When the Galactic Council cast humanity out, they had expected a slow, quiet death, a civilization collapsing under the weight of its own isolation. At first, it seemed as if their prediction would come true. Cut off from the vast network of interstellar trade, Earth and its scattered colonies faced an immediate crisis. Food shortages swept through the major cities, and entire industries collapsed overnight. The technology that had once been maintained with the help of galactic resources quickly deteriorated. Starships fell into disrepair, medicine became scarce, and energy grids flickered under the strain of an uncertain future. The people of Earth looked to their leaders for answers, but there were none. The resources they had left were finite, and the galaxy had turned its back on them. Desperation set in, but desperation had always been the birthplace of human ingenuity. On the outer fringes of their territory, the last surviving human colonies struggled against the void. These were the settlements that had been built in the age of prosperity, dependent on trade routes that no longer existed. Abandoned by their neighbors, they fought to sustain themselves on barren worlds that were never meant to support human life. Planets with thin atmospheres and brutal climates became the graves of the weak and the proving grounds of the strong. Those who could not adapt perished. Those who could evolved into something else, something far more resilient. The Galactic Council had believed exile would weaken humanity, but they had only forced it to become self-reliant in ways it never had before. The struggle was not just about survival. It was about transformation. Scientists worked in secret laboratories deep beneath the surface of Earth, salvaging what little alien technology they had left and reverse engineering it. They lacked the resources of the great galactic powers, but they had something far more valuable: desperation. When resources dwindled, they found ways to synthesize new ones. When energy supplies ran low, they developed new forms of power. They worked with relentless efficiency, pushing the limits of human intelligence and endurance. If the galaxy would not trade with them, then humanity would build what it needed from nothing. In the depths of their exile, they forged weapons, engines, and ships with technology unlike anything seen before. They did not have the luxury of time, so they worked with brutal determination, and what they created in isolation would one day make the galaxy tremble. But survival was not just about technology. It was about willpower. Humanity had been beaten down, left to starve and suffer in the cold reaches of space, yet it did not break. Instead, it hardened. On Earth, leaders emerged from the chaos, uniting nations that had once been divided by politics and ideology. The old world had been built on endless debate and bureaucracy, but the new world had no room for hesitation. Those who hesitated died. Those who led with strength ensured the survival of their people. A new generation was raised in this brutal reality, one that did not know the comfort of the past, only the relentless struggle for the future. They were not soft diplomats or idealistic explorers. They were something else entirely. They were the children of exile, and their purpose was clear: to endure, to grow, and one day, to return. Years passed, and the rest of the galaxy forgot about humanity. The Council never sent spies or scouts to check on their progress, assuming there was nothing left to see. The species that had once been their equal had been reduced to nothing more than a failed experiment. But in the darkness of deep space, something was changing. The first hints of their survival came in the form of faint, encrypted signals intercepted by listening stations on the galactic border. They were dismissed as the remnants of a dying civilization, too weak to be of any concern. But then came something far more alarming: disappearances. Merchant vessels that strayed too close to human space never returned. Patrol fleets sent to investigate reported strange readings before vanishing without a trace. Whispers of ghost ships, faster and more advanced than anything seen before, spread through the underworld of galactic trade. The Council dismissed the rumors as nonsense. But those who had once known humanity, those who had fought beside them in the past, recognized the signs. Humanity was not dead. It had been waiting. On the forgotten edges of the galaxy, in hidden shipyards built from the ruins of exile, a fleet was taking shape. These were not the old, outdated vessels that had once struggled against the Council's forces. These were something new, sleek, silent warships designed with precision and purpose. They bore no allegiance to the rules of the old galaxy. They did not follow the outdated principles of honor and restraint. They had been built for one reason alone: to ensure that humanity would never again be at the mercy of anyone else. The exiles had suffered. They had struggled, but they had not fallen. They had become something far stronger than the galaxy had ever imagined. And soon, the stars would know their name again. The Galactic Council had long erased humanity from their records, believing them to be a failed experiment, an anomaly that had been dealt with centuries ago. The exile had been swift and merciless. Trade routes severed, colonies abandoned, and Earth left to wither on the fringes of space, far from the heart of civilization. The galaxy had watched as humanity struggled, expecting them to collapse under the weight of their own isolation. For decades, no one spoke of them. No one wondered what had become of the scattered remnants of their species. To the great empires that ruled the stars, humanity was nothing more than a ghost, a memory lost to time. But memories have a way of returning, and ghosts do not stay silent forever. It began with whispers in the dark corners of space. Trade convoys disappeared along the old human territories, their distress signals cut off before anyone could respond. Patrol fleets sent to investigate never returned. Those few who survived told tales of shadowy vessels emerging from the void, ships with technology unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These warships did not bear the markings of any known faction, nor did they respond to hails. They moved with eerie precision, striking without warning before vanishing back into the emptiness of space. At first, the Council dismissed these reports as the exaggerations of frightened survivors. But then, the attacks spread. Outposts near human space went silent, entire settlements wiped out with military efficiency. The Council could no longer ignore the truth. Something was coming. And it was coming for them. In secret, the Council gathered its greatest minds, searching through old records, desperate to understand the nature of this new threat. What they found sent a chill through even the most hardened leaders. The ships, the tactics, the relentless precision, it all pointed to one possibility: humanity. But that was impossible. They had been abandoned in the wastelands of space, left with nothing. They were supposed to be extinct, or at the very least, too weak to pose a threat. The Council had believed their exile was a death sentence, but they had underestimated the one thing that made humanity different from the other species of the galaxy. They had underestimated their will to survive. In the depths of their exile, humanity had not perished. They had suffered, they had struggled, but they had endured. Cast out into the void, they had been forced to become something else, something stronger, something more dangerous. With no allies to rely on, and no supply chains to support them, they had built their own world in the darkness, forging an empire that existed beyond the reach of the Council's laws. They had taken what little technology they had left and improved upon it, pushing beyond the limits of what the galaxy deemed possible. They had become masters of survival, engineers of war, and architects of their own destiny. And now, after centuries in the shadows, they had returned. The first true strike came without warning. A Council fleet stationed near the outer rim detected multiple unknown signals emerging from deep space. Before they could react, a barrage of energy weapons tore through their defenses, reducing the mighty warships to debris in minutes. The survivors attempted to flee, but the enemy was relentless, hunting them down one by one. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer begging for acceptance. They had come to reclaim what was once theirs. As the news spread, panic gripped the council. The forgotten exiles had become an unstoppable force, and no one knew the full extent of their power. Were they merely seeking revenge, or did they have a greater plan? How many worlds had they colonized in the darkness? How many fleets had they built? And most terrifying of all, what new weapons had they created, freed from the restrictions of the galaxy's outdated traditions? The council scrambled to mount a defense, but they were no longer fighting the humanity they had once exiled. This was a new breed of warrior, hardened by generations of struggle, driven by a single purpose. For too long, the galaxy had believed it was safe, that its rulers were untouchable. But now, the forgotten had returned, and they were ready to remind the galaxy why humanity had once been feared. The war had begun, and this time, there would be no exile. This time, there would only be conquest. The Galactic Council had ruled for centuries, believing itself untouchable. Its fleets patrolled the stars, its laws shaped the course of civilizations, and its power went unchallenged. When it had exiled humanity, it had not expected any consequences. To them, humans were a failed experiment, reckless, unpredictable, and ultimately weak. Stripping them of their place among the stars had seemed like a necessary measure to maintain order. No one had imagined that one day the exiles would return. No one had believed that the Forsaken would rise again. But now, in the depths of space, an unstoppable force was moving, and the galaxy would soon understand the price of its arrogance. The first sign of the reckoning came in the form of a sudden silence. Entire systems along the outer rim went dark. Trade routes that had been bustling with activity were abandoned. Fleets sent to investigate never returned. At first, the Council assumed it was the work of pirates or rogue factions, but the truth was far worse. When the first wreckage was discovered, it sent waves of fear through the highest ranks of power. The remains of warships, once symbols of the Council's authority, drifted lifelessly in the void, their hulls torn apart with surgical precision. The attack had been swift, merciless, and terrifyingly efficient. There were no survivors, no distress signals, no warning, only destruction. Panic spread as whispers began to circulate. The attackers did not speak, did not negotiate. They struck from the darkness, leaving nothing but wreckage in their wake. The Council convened an emergency meeting, their voices filled with fear and uncertainty. Who were these invaders? What did they want? But there were some who knew the truth, those who had long feared the day when humanity would return. The exiles had survived. They had thrived in the darkness, growing stronger while the galaxy had grown complacent. And now, they had come for justice. Across the stars, the first wave of humanity's forces emerged from their hidden worlds. Their ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, sleek, fast, and built with technology far beyond what the Council had once allowed them to possess. Every battle was the same. Council fleets scrambled to defend their territories, only to be outmaneuvered, outgunned, and utterly crushed. The exiles did not fight with the hesitation of those who sought peace. They fought with the cold precision of those who had been wronged, of those who had spent generations preparing for this moment. They did not want treaties. They did not want negotiations. They wanted vengeance. As planet after planet fell, the Council's forces crumbled. The rulers of the galaxy, once so confident in their superiority, now cowered behind their fortresses, desperately searching for a way to stop the inevitable. But the exiles were not interested in drawn-out warfare. They had come to deliver a message, one that would never be forgotten. On the Council's homeworld, the final battle began. The planet, once a shining beacon of galactic order, was surrounded by an armada unlike any seen before. The Council's last fleet stood in defiance. But they knew the truth. They were facing a force that had been forged in suffering, a force that had endured centuries of hardship, and a force that would not stop until justice was served. The reckoning had arrived, and no one would escape it. The galaxy had turned its back on humanity long ago, believing that it could erase them from existence. But now, the forgotten had returned, and the stars burned with the fire of their revenge. The war was over before it had truly begun. The Council's fleets were shattered, their leaders captured or executed, and their once mighty empire reduced to ruins. The age of their rule had ended, and in its place, a new order had risen. The humans had not only survived exile, they had become something far greater than anyone had imagined. And now, as they stood victorious, they made one thing clear. The galaxy belonged to them. The war was over, but the echoes of destruction still lingered across the stars. The Galactic Council, once the supreme authority in the universe, lay in ruins. Its fleets had been reduced to debris floating in the void, its leaders executed or forced into hiding. The species that had once ruled over countless worlds now found themselves leaderless, broken, and at the mercy of those they had once exiled. Humanity had returned, and with it, a new order was about to be established. Across the shattered remains of the former empire, the survivors watched in silence as the victors took control. The exiled ones, humans who had once been considered weak, reckless, and unworthy of power, now stood at the center of the galaxy's fate. Their ships, sleek and powerful, patrolled the skies of conquered worlds, enforcing a law that no one dared challenge. The old rulers had fallen, but fear still gripped those who remained. What would the humans do now? Would they seek vengeance, wiping out those who had once abandoned them? Would they crush every species that had stood against them? The uncertainty was unbearable, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting for humanity's judgment. The first decree was simple. There would be no more Galactic Council. The age of politics, of corruption hidden behind diplomatic lies, was over. The humans had seen the consequences of such rule, and they had no intention of allowing history to repeat itself. Instead, a new government was formed, one that did not favor a single species, but rather the survival of all. Every world, regardless of race, was to contribute to this new system. Those who resisted found their weapons dismantled, their armies disbanded. There was no room for rebellion. The message was clear. The galaxy had spent too long in chaos, and now order had been restored. Not everyone welcomed this change. In the dark corners of space, remnants of the old regime plotted in secrecy, whispering of a day when humanity would fall. They spoke of taking back their worlds, of rebuilding their fleets in hidden strongholds. But the humans had learned from history, and they did not intend to repeat the mistakes of the past. Where the old council had allowed corruption to fester, the humans crushed it before it could grow. Where former rulers had let rebellions simmer for years, humanity struck swiftly, leaving no room for insurrection. They were not interested in endless wars or diplomatic games. They had fought for survival once, and they had no patience for those who sought to undo what they had built. As the years passed, the scars of war began to heal, and a new era began. Trade routes reopened under human protection, ensuring that no species would be left to starve or struggle. Science and technology flourished under human leadership, advancing beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Entire planets, once devastated by war, were rebuilt stronger than before. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy knew stability. But with stability came a new kind of fear, the fear of those who ruled. Humanity had not forgotten the past. They had not forgotten the betrayal, the exile, the suffering they had endured. And though they did not seek to exterminate those who had wronged them, they made one thing very clear. There would be no second chance. The next betrayal would not be met with exile. It would be met with extinction. The galaxy had been given its warning, and now it was up to them to decide. Would they accept this new order, or would they dare to challenge the ones who had survived the impossible? The stars no longer belonged to the old rulers. The balance of power had shifted, and it would never be the same again. The humans, once forgotten, had risen to the top, and as they looked down upon the worlds that had cast them aside, they knew one truth: this time, they would never fall.